Welcome all of you. So, in the previous lecture we studied about environmental clearance, what is the process, and we had some overview of MOEFCC. So, today we will look at different case studies. In one of the case studies environment clearance was granted and then it was implemented. In other case study, even though there was like say approval of environmental clearance, but ultimately it was rejected and the project was halted. So, with these two case studies we will also look at what is the role of ministry, NGT and Supreme Court when it comes to the environmental clearance. So, first case study is about JSW, that is Jindal Southwest 1200 megawatt thermal power plant. It was to be implemented in Jaigarh village of Ratnagiri district in Maharashtra. So, Ratnagiri, it comes under the Western Ghats, it is a Konkan ecological region and it is very sensitive to the biodiversity. But since it was away from the seashore or the beaches, the plant was located outside the coastal regulation zone. So, it need not need the CRZ or coastal regulation zone approval. The objective of this coal power plant, obviously it was to be run on the imported coal. The objective was to generate electricity and supply it to the Maharashtra State Electricity Distribution Company. And this imported coal, it was obtained from JSW port in Jaigarh. Now, this port from which this coal was being transported, that port came under the CRZ area and hence that JSW port area need to comply with the CRZ regulations. So, that is a background of this 1200 megawatt thermal power plant, and if you remember the number for category A projects, it was 500 megawatt. So, it is much higher than that. So, it is supposed to be the category A project and it will go to Ministry of Environment and Forest for approval. So, a typical coal power plant, how does it operate? You have a boiler where you burn the coal, there is a feeding of water, the water generates, water is converted to steam and then that steam is used to move the turbine and then turbine is connected to the generator which generates the power and the condensed steam in the form of water, it is pumped back again to the boiler. So, if you look at the whole schematic, you need heat for that boiler and that heat is coming from coal in this case. Coal is a fossil fuel. The plant is located somewhere in the ecologically sensitive area of Konkan. Coal is being shipped at the port which is under the coastal regulation zone. So, burning and transporting of coal is definitely going to have environmental impact. Then since it is a boiler which is generating steam, so it is a high temperature operations which are there. So, there will be some thermal load discharge, some heat losses in the surrounding vicinity which will have impact on the environment, and then there are the units of turbines, condensers, and these are the major power plant units, but then there are several ancillary units which there will be cooling tower and it needs lot of space, construction and other activities which is going to have huge environmental impact, which is going to have impact on different components of the environment, right. So, there was a need for environmental clearance. So, as per EIA notification 2006 schedule 1, thermal power plants particularly coal, they require prior environmental clearance before that plant is commissioned, and it was 1200 megawatt. So, it is a category A project, it requires clearance from the central ministry, and because it is a category A project, the EIA study is mandatory, it needs public hearing, it has to undergo the review of expert appraisal committee nominated by ministry. Now, this Western Ghats, as we saw, it is a biodiversity hotspot recognized by UNESCO and the port is close to the Arabian Sea. So, there is a need to check on whether the marine and coastal lives or the lands are affected or not. The port operations which were involved in collecting and shipping the coal from one location to other, that needed CRZ clearance. So, it was well established that this project needs environmental clearance, and the major threats to the environment, if you look at component wise, for air it is the greenhouse gases and particulate matter. What would be the compliance? The air quality standards, and control measures. So, it is in Ratnagiri. What are the air quality standards in Ratnagiri, and if with this particular power plant, if there are some emissions that are going to come out of the chimney of the power plant, what would be the air quality, and if it is beyond the prescribed standards, what would be the control measures so that the emissions of GHGs, SOx, NOx or particulate matter are within the limit. So, all those things then come under the compliance. Water, there is a requirement of fresh water to boilers. So, whatever waste water is generated after condensation or like after like with washing of coal or like cooling down the hot gas, there is a need for wastewater treatment plants. It is not only the water coming from the power plant. If there are say 100, 200 employees using that facility and they have their own wastewater generated from the pantry areas or from recreational areas or from urinaries, toilets. So, those also form the wastewater coming out from the power plant, and there is a need for like wastewater treatment units. Hot water discharge limit is there, so that comes under the compliance. For marine, again any wastewater effluents or hot water should not be thrown into the water beyond a certain temperature. So, because it may have impact on fish and corals and the coastal ecosystem. For land, if there is any solid waste which is generated which is going to be disposed of, or the coal which is extracted from the land, that is the land resource. So, ash which is coming out of burning coal, if that ash needs to be disposed. So, there is a safe disposal requirement for ash as well as for solid waste, that will come under the compliance. For human, if it is affecting the other community and other occupations there like fishing or farming. So, for that in the EIA process or the environmental clearance process, there is a need for local participation and public hearing, so that all the major threats to the environment are addressed with respect to the requirement for the compliance for environmental clearance. So, with all those threats identified, the mitigation strategies which were proposed, they were like this. For air pollution, the plant recommended having ESP. ESP is electrostatic precipitators, which like destroys the contaminants or solid particulates matter using charges, and the gas free of particulate matter will be released into the environment. So, ESPs with more than 99.9% efficiency, the covered conveyors, so that there is no flow of dust or particulate matter whenever the wind blows, and then low NOx burners and a green belt. Green belt is like you construct a park or a tree plantation around the facility, so that some CO2 is taken by those trees and it keeps on giving you like pure oxygen. So, that is the mitigation plan for air pollution. For water pollution, there was a policy of zero liquid discharge and recirculation and reusing of water as much as they can, because steam which is condensed into water will not be the contaminated water. It may be pure enough or clean enough to be used back again into the boiler. So, similarly, wherever there is a possibility of reusing water, it should be reused, and no liquid discharge should be coming out of the power plant to avoid marine pollution. Solid waste, 100% fly ash utilization in cement or bricks or lined ash pond. Since JSW have like multiple manufacturing units, in steel it needs lot of construction, or any of the units wherever it needs construction, there will be a requirement of cement and bricks, and fly ash can be a very good component of these cement and bricks. So, it can be used. Noise, for that they recommended acoustic enclosures, earthen buds, PP is personal protective equipment for workers. So, if there is a huge noise with the operations, like with the heavy machineries moving and running continuously, because the power plant, it has to operate 24 hours non-stop. So, workers should not get affected. So, for that PPEs were recommended. And for ecology, 300 hectare plantation, because this plant was going to spread over like say 500 hectare. So, to compensate the disturbance to the ecological zone, it recommended the 300 hectare plantation around that or within that facility. And so, for socio-economic, such a big power plant will generate lot of employment and local people would be given preference for employment, and local community or the nearby area can be developed using the CSR funds. So, that is how. So, these are the mitigation plans which were proposed after identifying the threats. So, if you look at the threats under different category, for each category the mitigation were proposed. That is the crux of that TOR or EIA report which a proposer prepares and submits while obtaining environmental clearance. So, with all these details and a proper EIA report, when it was submitted, the environment clearance was granted on May 2007 and with some specific conditions, like those conditions were to install high efficiency ESPs to limit PM less than 100 ppm or milligram per meter cube. Then stack height should be greater than 275 meter. So, if the stack height is at such a big height, then there is less likely to have those particulate matter coming at the level where there is a movement of people and community. Zero liquid discharge, ash utilization plan, green belt development for 33% of total area. So, that comes out to be 300 hectare out of 500 hectare. Then 6-month compliance reports, like every 6 months whether these things are met or not, those reports need to be submitted, and regular monitoring of air, water, noise and CSR and local employment commitments need to be checked. So, with all these specific conditions, the clearance was granted, the project was executed and it is running successfully. So, this is one example of 6 monthly like report of the JSW port, and this with this environmental clearance and with all those initiatives, the power which was generated using the facility, it is helping the Konkan region grow. Let us go to the next case study now. The case study 2, it is of Aranmula International Airport in Kerala near Pathanamthitta district in Aranmula. So, the objective of this airport was to boost tourism and connectivity in central Kerala. It is very close to this Sabarimala temple also, and it has lot of visitors from all over the country on a regular basis. So, this airport could have helped not only the tourists in central Kerala, but also to the devotees of those temple, and it was proposed by KGS Aranmula International Airport Limited. The project cost is significant, like 2000 crore. The land area was 500 acres and the first phase cost was around 550 crore. So, like 25% of the total cost, and it was a public private partnership. So, some government agency was involved along with the private funding. Now, with this background, so since it is a airport project, again it has to go to the ministry, it comes under the category A projects. So, if you look at a typical airport, what are the things involved in the construction of airport? Obviously, you need a huge building for arrival, for departure, right, then of different floors. Then the another big land space is required for runways and parking of flights and aeroplanes. Then other than building and runways, we need lot of energy for providing air conditioning throughout the airport as well as within the flights. Then we need lot of fuel to fill in the planes. So, it is a very energy intensive as well as economically intensive project, and this is definitely going to have huge impact on different components of environment. You can imagine the sound made by aeroplanes when it takes off or when it lands, it is huge. So, there is a huge noise pollution involved. The runways need to be like 1 to 5 kilometer long. So, it needs huge land area, and then within the vicinity of airport wherever we have the walls, we cannot have the community or residential areas. So, it will need some movement or shifting of the existing habitating people. So, there are different components of environment which will be impacted by such a big project. So, if you look at this particular project, why it was rejected, we will look at it in the next slide, but the history of timeline for environmental clearance for this project started in 2010. The terms of reference was granted by ministry. In 2011, there was public hearing and a strong opposition was made by the people and community living near the area which was like finalized for building the airport. But still the process went ahead and EIA was conducted, and when the file came to ministry in 2013, environment clearance was granted by ministry. But then again there was a huge uproar and huge protest by people and lots of environmentalists, and when they approached the NGT against this environmental clearance in 2014, NGT suspended the environmental clearance which was granted by Ministry of Environment and Forest, because it was in 2013, like before 2014 it is called MOEF, after 14 it was renamed as MOEF-CC. In 2015 NGT cancelled that environmental clearance, and when the project proposals went to Supreme Court to challenge the decision of NGT, Supreme Court in 2017 it upheld the cancellation. It said that whatever decision is made by NGT, it stays and it is correct, and ultimately that project was halted and airport project was not pursued further. So, this is a case where the whole process of environmental clearance was followed, EIA report was made, and even environment clearance was granted also by the ministry. But still when there was huge position and so many discrepancies were highlighted in the process of EIA or the EIA report itself, the NGT, which is like a court or a judiciary body for handling environmental matters, first they suspended and later they cancelled this environmental clearance. So, it was a category A project because of airport as per EIA 2006 notification, and it necessarily requires clearance from ministry, and initial clearance was granted in 2013 by Ministry of Environment and Forest. The basis for this clearance was the EIA report submitted by EnviroCare Private India Private Limited. It is like a third party agency qualified in doing EIA. So, that happens typically, like if a EIA expert or a EIA consulting company or a third party prepares a EIA report for any project, the extent of trust it goes like relatively higher compared to someone who is non-expert in EIA and prepares that EIA report. So, in the environmental clearance it was found that public hearing was not conducted as per the EIA notification and inadequately addressed local community concern. That was the biggest concern, like why it got opposed. The project proposer believed that the local community concerns were not many, and if there were some, they were addressed and public hearing was not conducted. So, that was a big lacuna which needed to be resolved. So, the EIA report, it failed to address critical environmental concerns such as impact on wetlands and biodiversity. So, though the report talked about air pollution, water pollution, noise pollution, the different alternatives for providing energy resources, it missed the impact on wetlands and biodiversity. The factual inaccuracies were there, so that the project was a domestic airport, it was misrepresented. And another important thing which came into enquiry was this third party company, it was not accredited to conduct EIA for airport projects. Maybe they are accredited for conducting EIA for category B projects or some of the types of category A project, but they were not accredited for airport projects. So, with these observations, with these findings, it was easier for NGT to first suspend and then cancel the clearance. Also, the project site, it included marshy and fallow land with significant portion used for agriculture, that is paddy fields, and this raised concerns about land use change and ecological impact amongst the environmentalists and local community. So, with all these different components of environment not adequately being addressed along with the local community concerns and missing of public hearing, these were the reasons why environmental clearance was revoked. So, final decisions were like the NGT cancelled it in 2014, citing that the EIA agency is incompetent and the EIA report was also incomplete and inadequate, not reliable, and in later Supreme Court also upheld or stick to the NGT's decision of halting the project. And if you look at all those news headlines, you can see there was a huge hype in media about this particular airport, because it comes from the both angles, like having a airport is often looked as a positive thing for the local society, because it will improve the image of the area, it will improve tourism, it will increase the prices of the real estate. Okay. But then the environmental impact is really important, it cannot be ignored. So, on the environmental front, if the project is not satisfactory and if it is not aligning with the compliances prescribed by the Environmental Act, Environmental Protection Act, or the rules of MOEFCC or the NGT, it may not go forward. So, these were again some of the news headlines related to this project, where people protested in huge numbers, and ultimately this project was closed. So, from in this project, since we saw that all three MOE, Ministry, NGT and Supreme Court were involved. So, there is a possibility that with some environmental clearances of bigger projects, especially category A projects, there may be involvement of these three bodies in India. So, if you look at MOEFCC, the nature is executive. It will formulate and implement the policies related to environmental clearance and will grant the clearance. That is the role of Ministry. What is NGT? It is a specialized judiciary body, and its role is to review the decisions of environmental clearance, ensure compliance and protect environment. So, whatever functioning or execution Ministry is doing through its authority bodies, whether that is going properly, or if someone is challenging or objecting to some of its decisions, then NGT is the body to resolve those matter. Supreme Court is a constitutional judiciary body, like a final authority, which will ensure the environmental rights and justice. If some project proposer or any citizen is not satisfied by the decisions of MO Ministry or NGT, they can challenge those decisions into the Supreme Court. Someone who is not satisfied with Ministry decision, they may not go directly to the Supreme Court, because NGT is made for that sole purpose of handling environmental related issues wherever justice is required. So, any environment related matter, if it needs justice or if it involves disputes and it needs resolution, people can go to NGT first, and after getting decision from NGT, if they are not still satisfied, they may approach Supreme Court, because that is the final judicial authority. So, to summarize, what we discussed today was two case studies of environmental clearance, where in one case it was granted and the project was successful. It took care of the economy as well as the environment and community surrounding that project, the Jindal Southwest Group project of thermal power plant. And the case study 2 of a airport, which was though they got environment clearance initially, but after opposition from public and environmentalists, it was revoked and rejected. Even after involvement of NGT and Supreme Court, the project did not continue. And then at last we saw how, like in hierarchy, people can approach Ministry, NGT and Supreme Court. With this, we will stop here. Thank you.